Hello, I'm Dennis McCuistion, and we're going to see if we can explode some myths in your thinking. Specifically, we're going to be talking about conspiracies and why some people believe weird things. Now, my guest is the prolific author Michael Shermer, who followed his book on why people believe weird things with his latest entitled Conspiracy, Why the Rational Believe the Irrational. Spoiler alert, we're not going to talk about the JFK assassination because there's not enough time. Michael is the founding publisher and editor-in-chief of Skeptic magazine, and his 2 TED Talks were at the top of the list for watching. So let's dive into the mind of the original skeptic. Michael, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Dennis. Nice to see you.
Tell that viewer exactly what a skeptic is. I've always considered myself one, but I don't know that I can define it well.
Well, so the name of my magazine is Skeptic. What we mean by that is that we approach all claims with an open mind and be willing to change our mind, but we start with the default position that whatever the claim is not true. So you say you think Bigfoot is real or the aliens are visiting. I say, that's super interesting. Show me the body. And if you can't, then I'm going to remain skeptical. If you do, I'll change my mind.
Okay, I love that. Now, I have often, unfortunately, Michael, gotten accused of going from a skeptic to a cynic. So where are we here with that?
That word cynic, it seems to remind people of the word skeptic, of no relationship at all. There are people that are cynical about life, but that's not skepticism.
Right.
Rational skepticism, again, is just what's the evidence, looking at the evidence.
Tell me, in that book that you wrote about weird things that people believe, give that viewer a couple of examples of that.
Well, from my Why People Believe Weird Things book, well, I dealt with creationism and evolution, Holocaust denial. I mean, denying the Holocaust, that's kind of a weird thing. Really weird would be like UFOs and aliens, or psychics who talk to the dead, or ESP, that sort of thing. By the way, anybody can talk to the dead. It's getting the dead to talk back. That's the hard part.
That's the hard part, yeah.
So my concluding chapter in that book was why smart people believe weird things. And the short answer is because they're really good at rationalizing beliefs they hold for non-smart reasons. That is to say, most of the beliefs all of us hold are not held because we arrived at that through some rational calculation or assessment of the evidence or whatever. We already believe it for some other reason. Your religious beliefs or your political affiliations, those sorts of things, are usually arrived at for reasons that have nothing to do with analyzing who has the best arguments or whatever. After the fact, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, and here's what I'm in favor of gun control. All right, why? Now you'll give me arguments for why, right, but that probably isn't the real reason. There's other reasons, and so that's what why the subtitle of my conspiracy book, Why the Rational Believe the Irrational, because it's not irrational to believe that a lot of conspiracy theories are true, because there really are conspiracies. I mean, Watergate was a conspiracy, Iran-Contra, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln was a conspiracy, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand that triggered the First World War, that was a conspiracy. Half the stuff the CIA was doing in the 50s and 60s, rigging elections in foreign countries to favor the fascist dictator over the communist dictator, because at least the fascists could be bribed to do business with our American companies and so on. The communists will just nationalize our company, so we got to get rid of that guy. The CIA did stuff like that, all the way up to assassinating foreign leaders.
Right.
Our intelligence agency, the CIA, was doing this, that a lot of times, not only did Congress not know about it, probably even the presidents didn't always know what they were up to. That's a conspiracy.
That's conspiracy. All right, so I'm glad that you said that there are real conspiracies, because a lot of people say, well, you're a conspiracy theorist, as if there were never a conspiracy. The question is that conspiracy real or not?
Yeah, that's
and
right.
So you talk in your book about conspiracies about, I'm not sure if it's real or unreal, that's not the thing I'm looking for, but
well, true or not true.
Paranoid and realistic. Let's talk about
yes.
Paranoid and realistic, which I thought were very interesting.
Well, a realistic conspiracy theory would be something like a major corporation is trying to, let's say, get control of the regulatory state, like the Sackler family and Purdue Pharmaceutical. We know that they captured the regulatory state. We know they bribed some of the regulators. That's a conspiracy, but it's a very specific, targeted one to make more money, right? So it's not, a more paranoid one would be like, Bill Gates wants to vaccinate everybody so he can control the world. Okay, nobody can control the world. There's not 12 guys in the Illuminati in London running the world's economy. Nobody can do that, right? So that would be more paranoid. And so I make that distinction because what we want to know is a conspiracy theory true or not? So, how big and grandeur is it? How many people have to be involved? The more people that have to be involved in a conspiracy to pull it off, the less likely it's going to happen, right? Because people, they mess up, they make mistakes, they change their mind, and so on. And this is usually how we find out if a conspiracy theory is true or not. Whistleblowers.
Well, you talked about June 28, 1914 as an example, as a conspiracy, and for that person watching may not know exactly that date. The reason I know it is because my dad was born on June 28, 1923, wow. But nevertheless, it was his birthday all those times. But you talk about that a little bit in terms of the guy who actually pulled the trigger on the Archduke, and then the fact that a couple of people backed out at the last minute and that sort of thing, so we knew it was a conspiracy.
Yeah, so the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, he was visiting the Serbian capital, Sarajevo, for political reasons. And due to tensions between the different countries, there was a group of Serbian nationalists called the Black Hand who were conspiring to assassinate him. So there was 7 of them. They each had been given their assignments secretly. Okay, you go stand at this corner, and you have the hand grenade, and you have the gun, and so on and so forth. But this is how things go, right? One guy went to the wrong house. He didn't get his weapon. Another guy changed his mind. Another guy chickened out. Another guy was in the wrong spot. And then another guy pulled the pin through the hand grenade. It bounced off the back of the car and landed in the car behind them and hurt the wrong people.
Right.
And so on and so on. And Franz Ferdinand's like, whoa, what's this crazy? And he drives away. And then it's like, well, let's go back to the hospital to check on our comrades who were damaged by the hand grenade. They went on the same route with the last assassin, was just sitting there, despondent, Gavril Princips. And he's like, oh my God, there he is. And he pulls his gun out, bam, shoots him dead. That's how life usually goes. It's random, it's contingent. There's, just things don't happen according to plan. They usually happen chaotically, and that's how it went.
That's how it went. Well, you spend a lot of time talking about QAnon. Is that how you pronounce it?
QAnon, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I never paid any attention to all that stuff, but a lot of people do, including apparently some elected representatives of all things.
Yes.
So give that viewer sort of the background of all this and the kind of stuff that goes on that this QAnon thing is standing for.
Well, so the QAnon conspiracy originally started with an event called Pizzagate, which was the belief that Hillary Clinton and Beyonce and Tom Hanks and other leading Democrats were sort of molesting children in a basement of a pizzeria in Washington, D.C. called the Ping Pong Pizzeria. And so now, does anybody really believe this was happening? The idea was that they were draining their blood to get the adrenochrome hormones, which is supposed to make you more youthful. This is the original theory. Okay, this is completely crazy. One guy believed it, Edgar Welch. He drove there with a gun. He went into the pizzeria and said, "Where's the basement?" And the guy behind the counter was like, "We don't have a basement here." And he's like, "Oh no!" And he shot his gun into the roof, and he ended up getting arrested. He went to prison for a couple of years. But most people don't believe that. But what they do believe is that, okay, maybe Hillary Clinton didn't really do that one, but it's the kind of thing those Democrats would do. So I call it a proxy conspiracy theory. That is, whether it's true or not is beside the point. It's that it stands for something I do believe that is kind of generally true. Democrats cannot be trusted. There's a deep state. Okay, so the QAnon then became a proxy itself for a bigger, more foundational conspiracy theory that there's a deep state, secretly like a shadow government, secretly running the U.S. government. So when Trump got elected in 2016, it was like, oh, he's going to uncover the deep state. So he gets in there and finds out it's just a big bureaucratic mess of bureaucrats trying to keep their jobs. There's no cigarette smoking man behind closed doors running the show that he could expose, right? And so that's the deep state. It's just bureaucrats trying to keep their jobs.
Well, there's a lot of truth to that, and some people believe it is the bureaucratic state, and it's just too big and unwieldy and all the things you're talking about. However, you were talking about what the CIA did, especially in the 60s and 70s in the 50s, 60s, 70s that we know about, and I believe there's a lot of stuff that we don't know about. So effectively, Allen Dulles, when he ran the CIA, with James Jesus Angleton and Dick Helms and all these people, they were running a big part of our government that the regular government didn't know about. Am I right about that or not?
That's true, but mostly with regarding foreign affairs.
Mostly,
Yeah.
but not totally.
Yeah,
But
well,
not
there was
totally.
MK Ultra, which was the mind control program.
Yeah.
Concerns that the North Koreans and the Chinese and the Russians were ahead of us
Right.
in mind control technologies,
Right.
which included psychedelic drugs.
Yes.
So they did dose a CIA agent named Frank Olson, who subsequently fell or jumped out of
Yes.
a high-story building in New York City and died. In the 1970s, President Ford paid the family $750,000.
$750,000, right.
Just said, we're not taking any responsibility
Right.
for this. We're just saying, let's just bury the hatchet here.
Yeah, well, there's
So that's true, yeah. So that kind of stuff goes on. That doesn't mean everybody's pet conspiracy theory is true, but it does mean we should be extra vigilant about government agencies.
Well, I think that's true. And I also think the idea of being extra vigilant by being a skeptic about all that stuff is really more important now than ever, given all the social media stuff that we've got. We've got stuff everywhere talking about crazy stuff every day. Am I right?
Every day, I can't even keep up. If I go out on a 3-hour bike ride and I come back, I can't even keep up with all the threads of the crazy things that had just happened in 3 hours.
I know.
I don't know how newsmen like you like you go way back when you just had the 3 networks and then a couple newspapers and,
Right.
and events happen like on a daily or weekly basis. Now it's like every hour something insane happens.
Well, and it's happened gradually over time, as you know. When I was, I think that it was 1997, there's a group in Dallas called TACA, which is about the arts and culture, and they were giving awards and basically celebrating 5 Texas news people: Bill Moyers, Sam Donaldson, Jim Lehrer, Bob Schieffer, and Dan Rather.
Wow,
So all 5 of them were in the
that's an
same room
all-star
at the same
team.
time, and I was lucky enough to have a microphone in front of I asked each of them if there was any bias in the media. And they said, oh, no. Now, by the way, Bill Moyers then attacked David Gold, which was a conservative talk show host. And so I interviewed Bill Moyers the next day, and he was a great interview because he's, all that stuff. But we didn't talk about stuff that I know we should have been talking about. But Dan Rather put it this way, and he said, Dennis, the problem today, and this is 1997 now, the problem today is there's such a competition to get the story first that it's difficult to make sure we get it right. Does that have anything to do with where we are today, 30 years later?
Oh yeah, because the economic incentives, if you are an independent journalist, is to get there first with the fastest crazy breaking headline you can possibly put up there, and of course that leads to exaggerations like crazy. By the way, Dan Rather's made something of a comeback. There's a nice Netflix documentary about him, and he has a massive online presence, social
Really?
media. He's got like millions of followers.
Really?
And when he posts something, it gets like retweeted a million times.
Well, he's retired in Texas, as you
Yes,
may know.
I
Now, I gave him an opportunity through his producer, Mary Mapes, who was on our program, to rehabilitate his reputation.
Yeah.
And he didn't think it needs rehabilitating.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people I know who think it probably does, for a couple of reasons. One of which was the George Bush thing that about what got he and Mary Mapes fired in 2004. And by the way, I'm not sure that what they were saying was necessarily wrong, but it got to be right before the election, trying to change the how the election went, which is where I think everybody can get in trouble, particularly journalists, wouldn't you think?
There's a phenomenon in psychology called the negativity bias, where we notice negative things more than positive things. In behavioral economics, losses hurt twice as much as gains feel good. So our psychology is wired to notice really bad things. So unfortunately, Dan Rather's filed 10,000 reports in his career. That's the one everyone will remember, right? The preacher who does all these good, wonderful things, and then he has an affair with the nurse or whatever happens, and he's like, oh, he's the cheater, or he embezzles. What about the 10,000 nice things he did? Oh, forget that. That's unfortunate.
That's unfortunate. Now, you talk in your book about something called a third culture approach. I never heard that before. Tell me what you're talking
This
about.
is based on C.P. Snow's idea of the 2 cultures. So C.P. Snow, a scientist, wrote about in America there seems to be the two cultures: the arts and literature, humanities, and the sciences, and they're like miles apart. So what the third culture idea is, let's bring them together. Let's make science writing beautiful writing, and that it's a form of literature. And there's a lot of third culture type books. I like to think of mine like that, but Steven Pinker's or Richard Dawkins or any of the great science writers now write for general audiences. And it's not dumbing down. It's not like here's the technical version, here's the dummy version. No, here's the version that everybody could read, and it's good literature. That's the idea.
Yeah. Well, speaking of writing, for many years, you had, was it a monthly article in
Scientific American, yes.
Yeah. So tell us how you got involved in that and what you were trying to do and what they were trying to get from you to add to Scientific American.
Well, I was covering topics that were on the margins of science that they would not normally cover. Pseudoscience or, vaccine denial or Holocaust denial or evolution denial. I would cover those sorts of topics. Or, claims by people that this is science, but it really wasn't science. So I had that column 214 consecutive months. Scientific American kind of went woke. And I'm not very woke, right? So, I say crazy things like, men cannot become women. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is, and they're not too crazy about that. They want to think, well, we want to be all inclusive. Anybody that says they identify as the other sex, we should support that. I'm like, no, actually, we shouldn't. Anyway, so that's I can't say that got me my column canned for sure, but it was along those lines.
Sure. Well, those things do happen. You also talk about something called proxy, tribal, and constructive.
Different kinds of levels of conspiracies.
Give us some perspectives on those things.
So I mentioned the Pizzagate QAnon is a proxy for something else. So even if it's not true, it stands in for something. A little bit like the OJ trial. I mean, OJ was acquitted on a conspiracy theory that the LAPD planted the bloody glove and the evidence and so on. But in fact, if you look at the history of the relationship between the LAPD and the African American community in Los Angeles going back to the 1950s, they did things like that. They planted evidence. They did bad things to the African American community. So it's not completely crazy or irrational for them to think, yeah, it's the sort of thing that they would do, right? Tribal is, of course, tribal conspiracism is, I believe what my fellow tribe members, political party or religious people or whatever. And then constructive conspiracism is that it actually pays to be a little more paranoid than necessary just in case. Because enough conspiracy theories turn out to be true that maybe you should widen your net a little bit and accept more of them as true than actually are just in case. Because making the other kind of error, assuming there's a conspiracy when there isn't, is relatively harmless.
Right.
But if you assume there isn't a conspiracy and there is, that could be dangerous.
Yeah, good point. The guy who went to the pizza store took it to the opposite. He took it to the opposite extreme, of course. One of the things that you apparently got, let's just say, approached by a lot of people about was 9/11. And along with those of us who were old enough to know what was going on when John Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963, everybody knows who was there then, where they were, and what they were doing. But 9/11, there are many more people, obviously, who know that. So give us a sense of what the folks who talk about a conspiracy were talking about there and the kind of arguments and perspectives that you had to deal with.
Well, the deeper motive behind 9/11 truthism is what's called a proportionality bias. The bigger the event, we want a big cause. So, the Holocaust happened, one of the worst genocides in human history, caused by the Nazi regime, one of the most evil regimes in human history. There's kind of a balance to that. But if you take 9/11, you telling me 19 guys with box cutters pulled this off? Come on. There had to be somebody else, the inside job, the FBI, the CIA, the Bush administration, it just feels like an imbalance there. That's what's behind it, I think. Now, the specifics, of course, how would the Bush administration pull off something like this, right? They're going to fly these planes remotely, and they have to take the passengers out, and then they have to crash them into the building right where the the demolition experts had gotten in there and planted the explosive. What I'm saying sounds crazy, but this is their theory.
Right.
Because we all saw the planes hit, right? So we know the planes were involved.
Right.
Okay, how did those planes, how were they flown there if it wasn't by the Al Qaeda operatives, the 19 guys, right?
Yeah.
Well, it was done with computers and the trained, CIA agents or whatever, and not one of them, none of their family or relatives wants to say, I heard about this, and think of the thousands of people that have to be involved to go into the World Trade Center buildings, break through the drywall so you could put the explosive devices around the supporting beams, and no one noticed.
Right.
These are, remember 93 Al Qaeda.
Well, 93, I was going to say, but I think 93, well, first of all, explain to that viewer what happened in 93, but I think that probably fueled some of these things later,
Yes, that's
didn't
right.
it?
So, yeah,
Explain what happened in 93.
Terrorists had a truck bomb, and they planted it in the basement beneath the World Trade Center building, one of them, and then it went off. And it was a huge thing. People died. The buildings were safe, but that was a huge news story. So the idea that somebody could attempt to do that is, again, not completely irrational. But Al Qaeda, they took credit for it. They were, Osama bin Laden's. It worked in a sense. He wanted to damage the United States. We spent trillions of dollars in wars, in homeland security, all the airport security, all that stuff that had to be done. And he pulled off the whole thing for $500,000. And it's like, okay, that makes more sense because that's how conspiracies really work. The idea that somehow the George W. Bush administration orchestrated hundreds or thousands of people, coordinated each one, and don't forget, you have to pay these people, right? There has to be some paper trail. They're not doing it for free. And not one of them wants to come on your show and say, by the way, my boyfriend, I was dating this guy. He told me the story. Right? Not one like that.
Well, that's really strange. But what? I had a guy on the program years ago. I won't mention his name. I don't think he's dead now, but a really bright economist. We were talking about stuff that he knew about. That had to do economic stuff. That's the other. And so I was driving along one day in Dallas a few years ago. I'm listening to talk radio, and this talk radio guy, who's a guy I knew, was talking to this economist on the phone, and this economist was explaining to him that 9/11 was a conspiracy, and that he knew it because the 47-story building went down. Now you heard that now.
Yes, right. Well, usually what you see are the pictures from the back side of the building that was not damaged. And so all you see is it collapsed. It looks like a perfectly structured building. But on the other side, that was damaged from the fall of the World Trade Center buildings, it's heavily damaged. And it burned for, 8-9 hours. And so, the fire department was there and so on, and they finally said, pull our teams out. But they said, pull it. They meant the teams, the rescue teams, not pull the building down. That's one of those. Anyway, so I don't find the Building 7 particularly mysterious. In any case, the way buildings collapse, you can watch any of these on YouTube, of intentionally demolished buildings. You see the explosive devices go boom, 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 and then you see it collapse.
Right.
These buildings, the collapse started where the planes hit.
Right.
And then you see the smoke. The puffs of smoke are not explosive devices. They're the floors compressing on top of one another, pancaking down. Fires are burning, so it's smoke that's getting pushed out of the windows. And it looks like an explosive device, but it's not.
Well, see, what was so strange about that? I called the radio guy on the phone because I knew him. I got through to his producer, which you do with people, and because they were making fun of this guy. And he said, "This guy must be some sort of nut." And I called him. I didn't say this on the air. I just talked about the air. I said, "Look, this guy is not wasn't some wacko when I knew him." On this sort of thing. He said, "You're kidding." And I said, "No, this guy's a legitimate guy. Look him up online, all that stuff." But I never could figure out how he got to there. So let me, at the few minutes that we have left, how does that individual watching this program try to cut through the stuff? You've gotten to be an expert at it, and you're only wrong in the JFK thing, but so you've got to be an expert at it. So what are the secrets that would help us figure out the wheat from the chaff, so to speak?
Okay, regarding conspiracy theories, is acknowledge that there are conspiracy theories that are true, but you have to take them one at a time. How do you know that particular one? The fact that this one turned out to be true doesn't mean that other one that
Right.
you're interested in is true. It may be, it may not be. It's best to start with the default position. Whatever somebody claims is probably not true. But keep an open mind just in case they present evidence and you go, oh, okay, so it's true. And then you accept it. The famous Moynihan quote was, when the facts change, I change my mind. What
Right.
do you do, sir?
Right, exactly.
Or
yeah.
whoever said it might have been John
Yeah.
Maynard Keynes.
Sure.
But in any case, yeah, that's the normal rational thing to do. With broader claims in general, just does it fit with the way the world works? Who's making the claim? Is it somebody that really knows this area? Or is it an outsider? It's not that outsiders can't be right, but they're less likely to be right than the experts. There's still value in expert and expertise. Scientific institutions, medical institutions, and so on, they still have value. They get it wrong. I would prefer that they admit it, like the CDC, Fauci, Collins. They should have said, we thought the mask was a good idea, then we changed our mind. Or we thought the vaccines were going to do this. You know what? We were wrong. People would respect that.
Exactly. Yeah, but the tendency, of course, is to continue to defend your position at all
good.
costs. Isn't
That's
that the
that
problem?
is normal.
That's the tendency, yeah.
But it's not good for a civil society to have experts in charge who never admit they're wrong, because everybody knows we can all be wrong.
Yeah, and there's no sin with being wrong.
No.
There's not generally against the law to be wrong. It's only when you deliberately try to defraud somebody when you're wrong and that sort of thing. So they should read your magazine, obviously, subscribe to your magazine. You have a podcast, which is how often?
2 days a week, The Michael Shermer Show. I interview and talk to authors of new nonfiction books: history, philosophy, economics, science, technology, AI. Yeah.
And so how do people tune into that? Is it
So
free?
if you go, yeah, it's free. Yep. Go to skeptic.com. You can see all our podcast episodes, the magazine. You can subscribe. We have free articles. Yeah, it's great. Skeptic.com.
Well, I would hope that people would do that, and I appreciate you. We've been
thank you.
talking about getting this show done for quite some time, and one of these days we'll do the JFK thing.
Okay.
And you'll
We'll take the whole time
and
on
you
this
will
stuff.
change your mind. So that's my prediction. All right.
Okay, all right.
All right. Well, now you know how and why to be a skeptic about almost everything, it seems. So catch Michael's podcast, The Michael Shermer Show, and find more information on important topics on our website as well and on social media. So thanks for letting us in to get you thinking rationally as we've talked about things that matter with people who care.